Hello my fellow City Skylines mayors and city building fans, and welcome to another subscriber city showcase. This time I have for you a city with 93% traffic flow, over 100,000 population, 78% unemployment, and get this, 0 mods or assets. Totally 100% vanilla. So if you got Skylines on the Epic Store or consoles, you will feel right at home. This city is called JoTopia, and it was made by one of my new subscribers who goes by John on Steam. Just like the player from the previous subscriber city showcase video, he too has used my advice for RCI Zoning mixing from the video, which I will link up here and in the description below, to make this awesome medium-sized city which has several very interesting personal touches and variations on my own designs, but with this massive unemployment percentage and the Hadron Collider monument, which we'll take a closer look at. If you're new to my channel, my name is Peter, and let us zoom in to analyze the city. Now, usually when taking a look at another player's city, I would first take a look at the utilities, but I can easily spot them here. We have some nuclear power plants, some solar power plants, we have lots of these incinerators to get power and get rid of garbage, and right next door we have the water pumping stations and the sewage dumping stations, meaning that I can pretty much see everything that is being used here in the city as for the utilities. So now I want to actually cover a very interesting topic for the city, and that is the population, how it is distributed, and the unemployment rate, which is skyrocketing in the city. Now, an important thing about the city is that it houses a Hadron Collider, meaning that all the education needs of the entire city are met by this one single monument. But the player who built the city hasn't yet even demolished all of his elementary schools, high schools, universities, and public libraries, meaning that we could probably get a lot more weekly income if we destroyed all of them. But I am not going to spend time on that. Weekly education expenses are currently 70,000, meaning that this income would probably climb over 100,000 if I were to spend my time demolishing those. But like I said, I'm not going to spend my time on that because I want to talk about the interesting fact how the high unemployment here, coupled with the high education, which is 89% highly educated for these Sims and only 8% educated, leads to practically no residential demand, because there are no Sims who can find jobs, and therefore no more Sims come into this city. This is partially the Hadron Collider's fault, because all the Sims get highly educated really quickly and fill up all the jobs, but another interesting fact is that you can see that people employed are at 35,300 and plus, while the jobs available are at 42,000. This is because there is a lot of industry here, even though it's 4.0 high-tech, meaning that it requires highly educated workers, which you can see if we go to the policies and see that there is Industry 4.0 being enacted here. And like I said, even though this is high-tech industry, it still requires at least some well-educated Sims. But as we take a look at the education chart once again, 89% highly educated, only 1% well-educated. So this is where we have the interesting fact that even though the unemployment is at 73%, we have jobs available 42,000 but only 35,000 employed, meaning that a lot of these folks are simply too educated to work in here. Now, as explained in the title and the thumbnail, there are no mods in this city, meaning that a mod like employ highly educated workforce would make a whole lot of difference in the city, as all of these jobs would be filled and there would not be a discrepancy of 7,000 open jobs despite the fact that there is 73% unemployment. Now, that is something that a lot of players make a mistake of, and I know that I'm turning the city overview into kind of a tutorial, but I really wanted to mention this problem when building the Hadron Collider and not having the open jobs necessary to employ all of your highly educated Sims. Now, to get back to looking over the city, the important fact about it is how it's zoned. You can see here that there is a massive amount of residential areas here in the middle, while around it we have offices, and these are offices which have leveled up to level 3, which now require a high percentage of highly educated, well-educated, and no uneducated or educated Sims. They soak up a lot of the Sims, while right next door we have the shops, the high-density shops, which are also at level 3. Now, the fact is, as I explained in some of my previous videos, that you should be well familiar with if you're my subscriber, and if you're not, I will link it up here on the right and in the description below. These buildings, the offices, do not care about all the sound pollution created by these shops, which are right next door. This means that you can have a lot of the offices being a damper zone between the shops who produce pollution, the sound pollution, and the residents who live here. And this player has used this strategy a bunch of times across the city, where he has used the residential areas in a wide area, which is not exactly what I would recommend. I would recommend a bit of a more of a mix, because this is a long way for somebody to travel to get to their jobs, although they can go onto the other side, which is good, but the ones on the edges have a bigger issue getting to their work without using cars or public transportation. But what is even more important and interesting is that the ground pollution, which is provided by the industry, well, not provided, but created by the industry, is not something that shops care about. So this is why you can see here that even though this is industry, it is 4.0 industry, so yeah, it's much less pollutant. As you can see, only 7% average ground pollution, but you can see that it's really brown here, and it is encompassing all the shops here. These shops don't really care about the ground pollution, nor can your Sims get sick from the ground pollution if they are working or shopping in a shop next to an industry area in a heavily polluted area. Next to them you have the offices, which are also under some influence by the ground pollution, but once again there are no sick Sims here, meaning that this is really the best solution for building cities in City Skylines, as the developers obviously thought of the way that the Sims are not going to get sick even though they are going to work right next door or even live next door to industry which is creating pollution. As you can see here, we have some Sims which are quite close but not that close to this pollution, and even though some buildings might even get some pollution on them, although these are the offices, so there almost isn't any pollution reaching this residential building. Even if it was here and the pollution was trying to get to it, these Sims would not be getting sick, as this is not high enough of a dosage for them to get sick. And this means that no matter how many times you repeat this pattern of residential, offices, commercial, industry, you will not have sick Sims, and you will have Sims who get to their workplaces instantly. And this is why this city has the fantastic, well, the fantastic flow rate. It just went from 92 to 93%. You do see a pop-up here. It says that this industry doesn't have enough buyers for products. Well, you can see that there are a lot of demand for commercial zones here. And if we take a quick look, I will go back to the traffic. I know this interests you a lot. If we go to the outside connections and to the export, we can see that over 4,000 goods are exported, and this is why this industry is soon not going to be alone in asking for buyers. So now let's go back to traffic and take a really good look at it. You can see that there is practically no red spots. There's a small red spot here, another here, there's some yellow, and there's a little bit of a red here and here, but that's practically it. For a city of 119,000 population with 93% traffic flow. This is something that this player has managed to achieve by making sure to zone properly, to have his industry right next to the zones, the commercial zones, and the shops which spend those goods, meaning that there is no need for the delivery trucks who will carry those goods to travel across the city to find a place to leave those goods, and they leave them right next door. As we can take a look at these red spots, you can see what the problem here is. This is just the spot where the traffic is coming off from this highway, which starts off from here, enters the city along these tunnels, and then exits to the ground and then interconnect with actual two-way, two-lane streets. Now this isn't really a design I would ever use, and I don't think I used it, but it's a really interesting attempt to find a way to connect the highway traffic directly to your town traffic. And this is not something I have seen before, quite honestly, I must admit, but it is really working out for this city. And even though you can see that there are no traffic lights here, the traffic just follows its patterns because it has the exact number of lanes it needs to use. These 3 lanes help the traffic separate into the specialized lane which they want to use. So if they want to go forward, they will use the middle lane. If they want to go to the right lane, and left, the left lane. And you can see how this beautifully flows, except of course the cops, which do whatever the hell they want in this game. But as I said, you can see that this works out quite well. As for the traffic going into the highway, it also follows the same routine. They use these lanes as they should, but they do most often use the middle one as well, because they do not plan to turn anywhere anytime soon. And that is why they use the middle lane, because as you can see here, there is no turn lane for a long time. And only up to here do they actually need to choose a lane. So this is why when you see them over here using, let's go back, using the middle lane, this is why. But if we go through the city and find another spot, let's say something like here, you will see them use much more the left or the right lane when they go into this highway, and you can see this whole column is using the right or the left. Only the traffic which is coming from this highway is using the middle lane, while the traffic that's going onto the highway usually uses the left or the right lane. And you can see that almost no vehicles will go into the middle, only rarely will they do this. And this of course depends on where they are going. If they are going all the way to the end of the highway and then choosing a lane over here, this is why they'll go into the middle lane. And this is actually one of the only examples where I have noticed the traffic actually being smart in this game and using the lane which it should use for a long time and then stick to it until it gets to a point where it needs to change its lane. So this is a design, the traffic design, the highway design is really beneficial for this city. It's working out really well. Like I said, as you can see, 93% traffic flow with almost 120,000 population. This is something that I have practically not seen in player-made cities. What's further interesting about the city is that it just uses the default in-game highway off and on ramps and these interchanges, which are quite simple and elegant. Now, they do not have the capacity for a lot of highway traffic to go through them because they have this issue of only one lane entering the city from one highway and one lane from the other highway, meaning that if you have a long line of trucks, it will slow down the entrance into the city. But as you can see, this city has no such issues, and this is mostly due to its slow import and export. But as we go into the statistics, we can actually take a better look at the residential zones, the commercial zones, industry zones, and office zones. And if we take a look, we can see that the office zones have almost double the amount of commercials in the industry zones, and this is where that low traffic comes from, because there is very little need for traffic when you have only 5,000 commercial zones and 4,500 industrial zones. Only these use the traffic in such high volume, while the residents, which we have in the city, over 270,000 zones, they just need to travel to their workplace or a shop, which is in this design quite close to them, even though, like I said, I'm not really a big fan of these huge residential areas like this without there being more zones in between them, mixing them with industry, offices, and commercial zones. Now I'm going to turn off these overlays so you can actually have some more nice views of the city. One interesting fact about this is that when you zoom out, you can so easily notice where the industry is, and if I rotate the view, you can pretty much exactly see where the industry is because of its telltale pollution. Right next door, you can see that there are going to be shops which have this different look than the offices, and then if I zoom in, you can once again more easily see the difference between a residential zone, an office zone, a commercial zone, and the industry zone. Now this, I think, adds a nice look to the city, and I'm particularly fond of this low density residential zone with its low density commercial zones. Now, as you can see, this is an organic food market, it's a low density commercial building, and there is actually full industry right over here, which means that this area does require a lot of workers, while these homes are, as you can see, are not huge homes, and they are particularly small because this player has not used any mods, especially not the mod which allows him to disable zoning on streets, meaning that when you take a look at these neighborhoods, you will rarely see a 4x4 house. You will usually see these smaller homes because this is a mess when you zone like this, and when you have zoning on all four sides, homes will simply be built haphazardly, and you will end up with this. I think this is a 4x2, this is a 4x3, this is maybe even a 4x4. Yeah, this is a 4x4 actually, and you can see that its maximum is 6 households. There is actually some public transportation in the city, which I don't want to forget. There is an airport, which you probably have seen in my overview of it here, and it just has a few hundred passengers which is serving. And if we take a look at the tourism overview, you can see that there is a modest amount of tourists coming into the city. But what I was more inclined to show you is the metro. There are 2 metro lines, each with a few stops, few vehicles, and gets about 300 to 500 passengers. The lines are pretty simple, they just go around and around. So if you take a look at this line, you can see that it goes from the right to the left. So it goes like this, goes over here, goes down here, goes over here, then passes on to here. So you have this single line going into a single direction and just making a circle. Same thing over here. This one is just a circle, it doesn't actually have a line going into the opposite direction. Now, you might think that this would allow more sims to travel if there was a line in the opposite direction, and this is something I would advise the player to actually try out. Another curiosity about the city is how you have the citizens which are at 94% happiness, you can see it right here and over here, even though you know, like I said, that there is a huge amount of unemployment. Now this is kind of due to a few factors. First of all, leisure centers are all over the place, and there are also curiosities like the aquarium, the posh mall, and so forth and so on across the city. Now these allow for tourists, but also visitors from the population. If we take a look at the parks and plazas, we can see that there is a bucket load of these. They are not really strategically placed, but haphazardly all over the place, and haphazardly is a word you can use often for the city. Although, as you can see, even in some anarchy, there can be order and there can be actually function and a well-working city. Now, another factor that goes into the Sims being so happy is because they have access to so much commercial goods, and even the rest of the goods are being exported, so you can know that at any point these Sims have a lot of goods available and they can buy them. So parks plus goods, plus of course there is an overwhelming coverage when it comes to health, death care, there is even child care, but there is no elder care. And the education of course helps, as I have personally noticed that highly educated residents do tend to be happier in this game. As you can see, there is very little crime, although interestingly enough, detained criminals are kinda filling up the capacity of the jail cells, even with this low crime rate. So I'm not particularly sure why there are so many criminals. Maybe there are just so many goods to steal? I don't know. In any event, this is something the player should keep an eye on if this jail capacity overflows with over 800 detained criminals. Maybe they just have long sentences, so they have to stay in jails for long, who knows. But it's one of those parts of the game that was never really fully developed, which is a shame actually. I often find it interesting to think maybe they should have used a DLC or a free DLC where the jail cells could be broken into, the criminals let loose around the city, and it would be kind of a social disaster, not a natural disaster like they have that DLC. As for the fire departments, you can see that there is also full coverage and there is very little hazards when it comes to fire. And going back to the electricity, like I said, there is plenty of electricity here and plenty of water and sewage treatment. As you can see, there are more and more of these signs telling the mayor that the industry doesn't have enough buyers for products, and like I said, I have already explained, there is an excess of goods and not enough shopping, because I would personally add some strips of commercial and offices through here, and through here, and I think that would really help the city out. For example, you can see that this place would particularly benefit from having some shops placed right about here. Now, like I said, the zoning is kind of hard to pull off in here. You can see them raise up the buildings as soon as I zone, because there is a need for more commercial zoning. But the roads are such as they are. In this area actually you can have nice buildings 4x4, one on each side of the street, but where you have blocks like this, you will have far fewer 4x4 buildings and more of these smaller buildings like this one here, these two here, and these are not as cost efficient as you might want them to be. So as you can see, fall in dental. Fall in dental. Is this sarcasm or a metaphor or... Yeah, if somebody gets this, please explain to me in the comment section. Yakizba tasty noodles. Okay, that I get. And the unicorn, spiky unicorn jewelry. Okay, I get that too, but fall in dental. Fall in love? Falling out teeth? But fall in? Yeah, I just don't get this. Please somebody explain this to me. It's really annoying me that I cannot get this. So anyway, as I was saying, the commercial buildings are easily going to go up and the demand is going to be spent. You can see it already being spent a lot, even though they are not all built here. Now that will use up the goods, and then there won't be a problem with the industry saying not enough buyers for goods. The Sims are really happy, the offices are really happy, the industry is really happy, even though more and more industry is saying not enough buyers for goods, so this is probably going to go down. And the commercial happiness, this is one of the things that I really need to go into in one of my future videos and explain not only the fact why you should keep this at 50% demand once you have enough of balance between the RCI, but also why the commercial happiness is so hard to go above 80%. I think that pretty much covers this entire city. If this video went a bit longer than you're used to, I hope you got a lot of ideas when building your own cities. Thank you all for watching, and please stay tuned for more videos such as this one.